Keep at them! Keep at them! Come on, you black-hearted heathens! Timothy Riley is waiting for you. If you're not with us, that the fire! Ah! Riley! The cellar!
This was once the site of the Danziger brothers' new Elstree studios. It was in fact the only film studio in the then small hamlet of Elstree, Hertfordshire, a place highly regarded as one of the homes of film and television production for nearly 100 years. In truth, though, the world-famous Elstree Film Studios, where over 500 major motion pictures have been made, is actually in neighbouring Boreham Wood. The Danziger brothers, Harry and Edward, had arrived in Britain from America to make movies in 1952. They began by renting studio space, mainly at MGM British Studios, Boreham Wood, to make 30-minute TV films and a now cult feature entitled Devil Girls from Mars. In 1956, they founded and opened the new Elstree Studios site, a former wartime aero engine testing factory, which had 6 sound stages and exterior shooting facilities.
And each stage had its own set of makeup, hairdressing rooms and dressing rooms, crowd dressing rooms. In addition, the whole complex had a restaurant, a cafeteria, a viewing theatre, very well equipped cutting rooms, a sound department, camera department, and of course on the other side of the car park was the wardrobe department. Whilst everything was purpose built with proper bricks, the wardrobe department simply had a sort of very, very large wooden hut. And on the back lot, away from quite a sizable car park, on the back lot there was one or two permanent sets that were constantly being redressed or repainted. So one day it would be Torremolinos or Berlin, and the next day it would be Moscow, and so on. And these sets were adapted all the time for different countries and different cities. So the whole thing worked very, very well.
What I remember about Elstree was the atmosphere of the people who worked. The director, the makeup, the actors, the technicians, all the people who worked on it, the stuntmen. That to me was Elstree. Yeah. The bricks and mortar, for me it was just a place. It was a hell of a place to get to. And somebody very kindly drove me there. I can't remember who it was. And we all got on very well.
It's a kind of bit gimcrack in the sense that, if half the set fell down, you'd all join in and glue it back together.
It was a lovely studio, beautifully appointed, lovely little dressing rooms, and every possible facility you could wish for. Beautiful big sound stages, and very efficiently were run, very well run.
In the 6 years that followed, the Danzigers would produce over 140 second features and 6 television series, making Harry and Edward possibly the most industrious British low-budget production outfit of the late 1950s and early 1960s, and most certainly the most financially successful independent television production company of their time. They also gave work to many up-and-coming actors, directors and technicians. Among the first to be employed were production supervisor and producer Brian Taylor, assistant director Geoffrey Hellman, and clapper boy Bob Jordan.
It worked really like a conveyor belt there, because we spent about each 30-minute episode of a television series was roughly 2.5 days. If we finished an episode, say, at 11 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd move on to the next stage to start the next episode. I mean, the management would not say, "Okay, boys, we finished at 3 o'clock, go home, well done." No, we simply move on to the next stage and the next episode, and the director with the cameraman and myself and the sound recordist and other key people, art director, would start to discuss how to use that particular set for that particular story with the new script that we'd been given for the new episode. But we did get behind schedule very occasionally, and of course we had this joke thing that the whole industry sort of laughed at, that Harry and Eddie would tell us to tear a page or two out of the script. And in fact we did do that from time to time to shorten to make up on the shooting schedule. Yes. On the stage. And so others might say, well, yes, but surely the picture, the 30 minutes would only finish up at 28 minutes. What did you do? Well, of course, as you know from experience, you simply cut in the sunset or some library material or something from an archive or dawn coming up in the morning to fill in those 30 seconds missing from the cut-out pages or page.
They always named it as being their representative at the studios. And they always used to ring me up to ask what the stage of production was. I used to see them regularly to report on what was going on. They gave me the script when they had a script which they'd had written by various writers. And it all started from there. I had the script, I had to decide on who was going to direct it and who was going to be in the cast. But of course with television series it wasn't so difficult, because you had the leading artist playing the lead, and once you chosen him, you just got back the extras and people in small parts that you knew were good at their job. And the big thing about the Danzigers was that they didn't chase you about doing things as long as you produced what they wanted every week. And they said you could make 2 half-hour films a week, 2.5 days each. That's all the time you were allotted, and you had to make it. And some way or other we did. We stuck to it. That's why they were able to sell them at a price which didn't prevent them being sold here and in America and the rest of Europe. It was one of those things. They were taskmasters, but they knew that these things could be done. They knew that they had a script that was timed for 60 minutes. It should be shot in 8 days. Mm-hmm. If you had a half-hour television script, there was no reason why it shouldn't be shot in 2.5 days. That was the answer.
I know that in those days you started as a clapper loader, which I was, and your other duties like washing the cameraman's car on a Friday and getting the tea at the drop of a hat, so you were always running over to the canteen getting a tray of tea.
And Danziger, you're not doing a Danziger, are you? And I said, yeah, I love them, I enjoy them, but they don't pay you anything. No, but it's fun. Mm-hmm. I liked Harry and Eddie, I really liked them, I was very fond of them.
Well, they used to visit the studio only occasionally, maybe, I think, if I recollect, about once a month. And they were very low profile. When they came on the set, there wasn't a big fuss, and they didn't demand a big fuss. They used to come on the set very, very briefly and just have a quiet conversation with 2 or 3 of the key technicians, and then go away. So they didn't come to complain or say, well, you went over budget, or why are you taking so long. There was nothing like that about them. They were very pleasant guys to be working for.
I think they were, actually, with all due respect, and I don't know this for certain, I don't think they interfered in the film. I think they let us get on with it. I think. I mean, I was very young, but I was never aware of, oh my God, they won't accept this or they won't do that. They did leave it to the producers and the directors to get on with, and because they are professional people. So
they were astute Jewish American entrepreneurs. They weren't the mafia, as some people first suspected. They were not the mafia, but they were close.
But of course, they did have one advantage over other makers. They knew how much each film was costing them to make. Now, if you started a film, the first feature at Pinewood in those days, and you overran by 3 weeks, your production costs were going to be much higher than you initially said they were going to be. So you had to borrow more money from the bank, and you demanded more money from the distributors. So they were at an advantage. They could sell their films at a set price, and they could sell them before they made the picture. So they didn't have to borrow money, because they'd taken advance on the deal before the picture was made.
They were honest. They were honest, and you can't say that about every producer.
You know, they had a reputation in the States because their series were being shown in the States. I mean, it wasn't just making their series for Associated Rediffusion or anybody else. It was making series for the American market. So their names were up on the screen in America. And at that time, remember, television was still in its infancy, and people, you know, didn't treat it quite as freely as they do now. They watched programs, and I suppose the Americans judged it on how many people had watched the films in the States, you see.
Of course, there were one or two little amusing points. Harry and Eddie gave a stipulation that all the lighting should never be low-key, arty type lighting, because the television channels in America would never buy or show or transmit stuff which we call in this country low-key, because it just didn't transmit well on television screens. Low-key black and white shots and footage. And the other thing was that none of the actors should ever wear bow ties, because they would be known as goddamn fags and in America, and American television channels would not want to show any footage or material with actors who were goddamn fags. So there was that one.
I'd had a period out of work, as most actors do, and sitting in a coffee bar in Soho, in came John Longdon, who was a very distinguished actor of the 40s and 50s, wonderful profile like John Barrymore. And I'd done a play with him a few months before that. And he said, well, he said, come over to Danziger. He said, they're doing all these films, and the money's good. They used to pay £7 a day plus £7 like repeat fees, I suppose they would be. And it was a boon for out-of-work actors, you know, and off we went to Elstree. And they were turning out films like sausages, including a serial with one young actor, an English actor, who had been famous by being in Little Women, the June Allison, Elizabeth Taylor version. But I think that's the last American film he did. And in fact, I worked with him on that, and it was so bad they were doing 2 series at the same time in different sets. And he'd rush in. I had a scene with him. And of course he didn't have time to learn his lines, so he was reading over my shoulder. It's very distracting. No, that's how I heard of Danziger, so I went across and met the casting woman, Barry Gray, who was a very sweet woman. And she said, yes, fine, and I was playing detectives and different parts, you know, and a lot of films came up, and really delighted to do it.
I mean, it really had very much a family feeling there, and people would go on working for months on end together, and very few people would leave. They'd enjoy staying there. I mean, the salaries were not gigantically high. They were modest salaries, but neither were they. They were higher than the union basic salaries, and they worked very, very well. People were quite happy, including myself, to work for their